One day, there was an old farmer. He's taking a break from his work. He's in the shade of a nice big oak tree. He's been working all day. He's looking out at the horizon and just kind of enjoying the beautiful clouds that are floating along. And he thought he saw something in the sky there. And he squints his eyes and he's looking, and sure enough, there in the clouds were the letters P and C. Clear as day. He could see P and C in the clouds. And he's staring at these fluffy white letters, P and C. And he's thinking to himself, I think God is calling me to preach Christ. And so in the next few weeks, he's convinced. He sells his farm. He sells all of his equipment. He finds a congregation that's willing to allow him to preach his very first sermon. And so the Sunday comes and there's excitement in the air, and he gets up behind the pulpit and he begins his lesson by telling of the story. How he saw the letters in the sky, P and C. And he preaches for about 45 minutes or so, and it was one of the worst sermons that had ever been preached from that pulpit. It was so bad the babies were screaming. He was mumbling through the whole thing. He was all over the place in the sermon and barely made any sense. The people were just squirming in their seats. They were so uncomfortable from it. Afterwards, of course, he's standing by the door and everyone's shaking his hand to leave. And a man comes up to him and he's shaking his head. He said, brother, please don't take this the wrong way. But I think if God was calling you to do anything that day, I am sure it was to plant corn. You know, gospel preachers are pretty important in this world. The Bible says, how then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him in whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? Romans chapter 10 and verse 14. But farmers, I would say, are just as important. In fact, one might just say that there wouldn't even be preachers without farmers. Because think about it. Preacher don't have good food on his table, probably not going to be any able-bodied preachers behind the pulpit, right? And we might point out, too, that going all the way back to Genesis, the very first man, Adam, was a farmer before he was ever a preacher or a teacher in any sense, right? Read Genesis 2, where he had to tend to the garden. What do you think? I think that was work. And so as time went on from the very beginning, men were able to pull various truths from the life of working in the fields of this earth, and they were able to apply them to godly living. And you find a couple of those, or a few of those examples in the Bible. Paul gives one example in 2 Timothy 2 and verse number 6, where he says, the hard-working farmer must be first to partake of the crops. And James chimes in too, James 5 and verse number 7, says, therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and the latter rain. And Paul gives us a third one, 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 10, where he says, he who plows should plow in hope, and he who threshes in hope should be partaker of his hope. Now that's only half the verse there, and we're going to give that verse in context in just a moment. But I think this is what we're going to do tonight. We're just going to go through these three verses, and I think each one of these gives us a little bit of insight into how God desires us to view our Christian life and how he wants us to live. So you go back to 2 Timothy 2 and verse 6. You can turn there if you want. We won't be reading too much from that chapter, but we find that a farmer is hardworking, right? And of course, he's stressing Timothy, you need to be a hard worker. And he says the hardworking farmer must be first to partake of the crops. Again, we go back to Genesis chapter 3 and verse 17. God tells Adam, cursed is the ground for your sake, in toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. And so that's where it all began, right? The farmer, I suppose we're all in agreement here. The farmer, it's not easy. It's no easy task. I think that was very true back then, back in the old days. And then even though we have modern technology right now, farming, I don't think is still an easy job. Farmers got a lot to do, got a lot to worry about. You got drought to worry about, maybe floods even as well, destroying the crop. Animals coming in, birds coming in and eating and stealing and trampling everything that they planted. Certain plant diseases infecting the crops and destroying his produce, and then the insects and the bugs and all of that wonderful, great stuff. And so the farmer's actually got nature working for him in some ways, right? He needs nature to just do its thing so he can have a good crop, a good harvest. But then he's also got nature working against him as well, right? What gives, you might say. And not only that, I mean, the farmer's work that's time consuming, right? Tilling the land, planting everything, fertilizing, watering. When the time comes, if he's fortunate enough to have a good, healthy crop, he's got to get out there and he's got to get it all in. He's got to harvest it all. And there's probably some things I left out in between there. Well, the man's got a lot to do. Farmer's got a lot to do. And so it takes work, doesn't it? And listen to this. Things that take work, and we know what things in life takes work. It's what things we kind of get away with. But things that take work should naturally keep us busy. And when Paul was writing this, 2 Timothy 2, he's telling Timothy, look, son, you can't be lazy. You are in an important position. You get an important job, not only as a Christian, but he was there as a teacher, and he's appointing elders and things like that. He's saying, Timothy, you can't be lazy. You got to get to work, and you need to stay busy. Timothy, don't ever forget that labor and hard work always comes before the reward. I think one of the greatest lessons ever given relating to farming was probably Jesus' parable about the sower and the soils, right? And where did that great teaching, where did it begin? You remember how it began? Jesus says, behold, a sower went out to sow. And if that never took place, you take that away and you don't have a parable. You don't have a lesson. You don't have one of the greatest teachings of all time. The sower went out to sow. That's work. And so as a good servant, I'm looking at myself, I'm trying to be a good servant of the kingdom. And I can't afford to be lazy because there's too much at stake, right? Now the farmer, he's got a harvest. He's got crops and fruits and vegetables and the like. What are the Christians' crop? Well, I think when we're looking way to the end, we're looking at an eternal home with the Lord. And the Christian's crop would also be souls won to Jesus Christ. Right? And you can't be a soul winner if you just sit back and wait for things to just happen all on their own, right? Oh, we want so many people to be saved, don't we? If I gave you a list, you could make a list of the names of people you want to see in heaven. And you just wish somehow, some way, you could say the very right thing, or maybe as a miracle would happen, and they'll just show up to services, and maybe they'll just want to be baptized and they want to obey the gospel. Yeah, I don't know if maybe that'll work sometimes if we just wait people out, but I don't think we can take that chance. The Bible says the soul of a lazy man desires, so they want and has nothing. The soul of the lazy man desires and has nothing. Proverbs 13 and verse number 4. And so look, folks, we got to get up and we got to speak up and we got to start planting the word every chance we get. And if we see any growth, have you ever say something to somebody about the Bible or about worship or something like that, and they kind of give a little bit of response, like you can tell they're listening to you. Maybe they say a little something back. Well, what do you do then? You just ignore them? Or do you kind of follow up? Or do you respond? If they respond, do you respond in turn? Remember, while Paul was planting, somebody was doing the watering, right? There's two different things. Now I'll give you a little homework. You find out who did the watering in 1 Corinthians 3 and verse 6. Paul did the planting and so-and-so did the watering. But sometimes, and I think many times, you are going to have to do both of those. Well, that's not fair. Oh, I mean, yeah, well, that's not fair. Sometimes we're going to have to do the planting and we're going to have to do the watering along with it. We're going to have to do both. I think we need to learn to follow up with people. Say something about the church. Say something about the gospel. But then don't just throw up your hands and be like, well, that's it. I guess we're done. No, we got to learn to follow up. We got to learn to cultivate that seed that we have planted, and we do it with love and we do it with meekness. And so that word can hopefully become rooted even further in winning some souls to Christ. There's a lot of similarities between the farmer and the Christian, but there is one big difference between the two. The farmer can never be 100% sure that his hard work is going to pay off. Now, he can do everything possible, do it all right, do everything he needs to do, but he can never be guaranteed that his crops are going to produce a harvest great enough for him to feed himself and his family and make a living out of all of it. And so there's always going to be, in his line of work, some uncertainty in his reward. However, when we translate that to the Christian life, our ultimate reward, we're talking about winning the souls, but our ultimate reward is heaven, right? And so our reward, I think, also is at the end of the day, at the end of our life, knowing I think there's a good reward, a good feeling in knowing that we have done all that we could do for God and for Christ who gave his life for us. And we can be absolutely sure of heaven if we will just sow the seed and be a hardworking Christian. Galatians 6 and verse 9 says, and let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap. You see the promise there? You see the certainty there? We shall reap if we do not lose heart. All right, let's move on to the second verse. Let's see if my this thing will comply. James chapter 5 and verse number 7. We learn there patience. Therefore be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord, and see how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and latter rain. I don't think this goes for every farmer. And when I say the good farmer, I mean a farmer who just knows what he's doing and he's got all his ducks in a row and he's a good farmer. Okay. So why do you think it's easy for a good farmer to be patient for the harvest to come? I think it's because he knows he has no other choice. He's got no other choice. He gets the land tilled 1 week, and I don't really know how long it takes to do all this stuff, okay? I'm just kind of guessing. But he gets the land tilled all in 1 week, and he's satisfied. And he can move on to the next stage. And he gets the seed down the next week, and he's a happy man. And he's proud of what he's accomplished, even though he's nowhere near the end. He's nowhere near the harvest. So why is he happy then? Why is he proud of what he's done? Why is he content? Why is he patient? Because he knows he has no other choice but to patiently wait. He's figured that out. That's how things are. That's how nature works, and there's nothing he can do to change it. A good farmer is content with God's process. You see the lesson there for us? He's content with the way God does things. He can see God's blessings even without the harvest that's right before his eyes. And he's happy. He's happy to do his part in seeing his eventual reward. James chapter 5, it talks about being patient in suffering. If you have your Bible open there to James 5, you can see that suffering is kind of the context there. And in verse number 7, or in verse number 10, James gives an example of the prophets that had come before and how they suffered through. And then he mentions in verse number 11, probably the greatest example of patient suffering, which is who? Job, right? And so what he's trying to do, he's trying to get his readers to understand the importance of seeing things through despite the suffering that they might be going through, because at the end of it all, they're going to be able to see what the Lord had intended all along for them. And I think even in the life of a farmer, there needs to be a willingness to suffer. Don't you think? I mean, surely every season that comes around every year is not a golden one in which all things go right. It can't be it. Because we live in this world. It can't be perfect every time. You know, I imagine some seed doesn't take, or some things spoil, or whatever it might be, and equipment breaks down, and the hired help might leave for a better job, or they're just garbage workers in the first place, and fences need mending, and storms take their toll, and so on and so on and so on. You know, when you read, you get 2 Timothy 2, verse 3, about the good soldier, and Paul says the good soldier needs to endure hardship. Well, I think that goes for the athlete that he mentions there as well, but also the good farmer. He's going to have to endure hardship. But his patience is going to see him through all of that. Proverbs 21 and verse 5 says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty, surely to poverty. Did you get that? Proverbs 21 and verse 5, the plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty, surely to poverty. So we can't be hasty. We got to be patient. And like I was saying this morning in Isaiah class, we cannot rush God. It just ain't going to happen. And I think when we do try to rush God, and we see this in the Bible sometimes, well, we kind of mess things up. We're going to mess things up. Think about Sarah and Abraham. Sarah tried to rush God's plan. Abraham, you're gonna have an heir. We're gonna have a son. Hooray! Well, when's that gonna happen? Don't know. God says it's gonna happen. Well, Sarah tried to rush things. We're not going to get into that story, but Genesis chapter 15 and 16. God promised Sarah and Abraham too. We can't leave Abraham out. Abraham should be blamed. They should have been patient instead of trying to rush God. And so if the farmer impatiently wants his harvest quicker than normal, what do you think might happen? Well, I would think that he's going to be prone to making rash decisions. He's going to overwork himself. He's going to make mistakes that might cost him his whole crop. And then where's he going to be? And our impatience, anybody struggle with patience? Probably nobody. We're probably like golden angels when it comes to patience, right? Impatience can consume us if we're not careful. It'll get to us. It will consume us, and all the plans, all the grand plans we have are going to fail if we're not patient. Our goals that we have are never going to be reached. And I think congregations, whole congregations, leadership of the Lord's church would do very well in heeding this proverb. Don't be hasty. I think we should make plans and we should make goals. But sometimes maybe we overreach, and I'm not saying we're doing that here. I'm just saying we don't want to fall into that. Hey, let's take our time, Yeah, I know no one lives forever, but sometimes our patience is going to pay off. And individual Christians too, of course, are going to benefit from remembering the kind of patience that is required, absolutely a necessity for the farmer. All right, last one. At least something's coming up behind me. I don't know why it's messing up on me. 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 10. We find there that the farmer is hopeful. And I didn't mean for this to kind of mesh with the morning sermon, but it just happened to turn out that way. How about that? 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 10 says, he who plows should plow in hope, and he who threshes in hope should be partaker of his hope. Now let me give you a little bit of context there. Paul is discussing his rights as an apostle, right? Talking about his rights as an apostle. And so he's laying forth some arguments. He's attempting to prove, and he does prove, that for his and other gospel preachers' rights to be supported by the church. Okay. Now, if you're there with me, you can see in verse number 9, it says, for it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. Is it oxen God is concerned about? Verse number 10. Or does he say it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written. And then our text, for he who plows should plow in hope, and he who threshes in hope should be partaker of his hope. So Paul and others, they're putting forth their work for Christ, First and foremost, because they love the Lord, right? They love the Lord. They're fine with that. But it was right for them to look forward to and to expect to be provided for and taken care of by other Christians, by the church, by God's people. And it's simply, it was right for them to expect to reap from what they had sowed. Reaping physical things from spiritual things. That's kind of the context. And this is exactly the kind of mindset that the hard-working, patient farmer has, which is why Paul kind of goes into this comparison about plowing in hope. So what's the farmer do? I mean, the good farmer, he's going to keep his head on straight. He's going to plow in hope. He's going to work in hope. And remember, what was the definition? What's the biblical definition of hope? The farmer plows with a strong desire coupled with that confident expectation. And so the farmer, he's putting all his work in with hope. That kind of hope now. Knowing that with God's blessings, the harvest is going to make all his labor worth every drop of sweat, every drop of blood, every scratch, every injury, and even every tear that man might shed. And you look back at verse number 9, Paul asked a question. He asked, is it the animal that God is concerned with? Now, I would say, yeah, he's concerned about the animal. I mean, God's not cruel. He doesn't desire us to work the animals that he created to death, right? Without feeding. He doesn't desire animals to suffer and work with no food and then just die off, right? So I'd say he is concerned about animals, but he is far more, and this is Paul's point, far more concerned with his children, you and I, receiving the good blessings that are due us. And yes, I know we're unworthy, but when God promises to bless us, I mean, what do you think? If we're faithful to him, what should we expect? We should expect blessings. So like the farmer, the Christian lives and works in hopefulness. And I hope all tonight that we have some hopefulness in our lives. I like this proverb, Proverbs 23 and verse 18. It says, for surely there is a hereafter, and your hope will not be cut off. Isn't that good? Our hope will not be cut off, because surely God's going to keep his promises. Hopeful. Hopeful this works here. All right, here we go. I think it's so important that we get a picture of what a person is saying, because if you can't do that, all it is a lecture, and then you're tuning out, and I know it, and it's okay. I don't blame you. Probably tuning out anyways. It's possible. But I can picture a farmer, and I cannot help but think of Dean. There was this video that came out of Dean Googe. Y'all probably saw it, right? He's in like some rock star or something, but he's a farmer, and he's got his tractor, and the guy is just the image of a farmer. It's pretty neat to see. But I can picture a farmer who knows when the seasons are changing, and he knows when to work, and he knows when to rest, and he knows exactly what to do and what not to do, and he knows exactly when to do the things that he needs to do. And I can picture a farmer who is confident in his actions and all the decisions that he makes, who doesn't mind having to wait. I can picture a farmer who can still count his blessings during the storm and after the storm. I can picture a farmer who is completely and totally 100% satisfied when his harvest comes around. And I gotta tell you, that sounds like the kind of Christian life that I want. I want that. I like that. The good farmer and the faithful Christian, they know contentment. They know what that is. And they know peace of mind. They know what peace of mind is and what it feels like. And I gotta tell you, I desperately want to have that. I want contentment, and I want peace of mind, and I want to hold on to those things as long as I possibly can. I want those things when the sky is falling all around me, and I want them when all is well. Let me end with this. A farmer he needed to hire some help for his farm, and he's interviewing these fellas. And one guy comes up, and he really liked this guy. The guy seemed to be very joyful and very able, and like, all right, this guy's going to work out. So he asked him, and he says, what makes you think that you can do this job that I'm hiring you for, potentially hiring you for? And all he said was, because I can sleep when the wind blows. And the farmer kind of looked at him funny. He's like, well, he's thinking in his head, that's a strange answer, but he liked the guy, and so he went ahead and hired him, right? So not long after, a violent storm rolled through the area, and it came in the middle of the night over his farm. And the farmer, he wakes up and he runs outside because he's thinking, all right, if the barn doors aren't shut properly, the stables aren't closed up, and there's going to be damage everywhere. And if the animals are not tied up properly, they're going to get hurt. And if the equipment's not put up, then that's going to get damaged. And so he's rushing out there, and to his surprise, he finds everything in perfect order, no damage whatsoever. And he opens up one particular door, and there's the young man that he hired, peacefully sleeping on a pile of hay in the barn. And then it hit him. He understood what that boy meant when he said, I can sleep when the wind blows. Because that man was fully prepared when the storms came. And he was fully prepared when his master came to check on him. I'll leave you with this question. Can you sleep when the wind blows? It'd be nice to say yes, wouldn't it? But I say it is impossible to get to that stage in life as Christians if we are not hardworking, if we are not patient, and if we are not hopeful. So what say you this evening? You need to obey the gospel tonight. I hope you'll make that choice. Shouldn't put it off any longer. If you need to study, let's study together. If you believe, you're ready to repent, ready to confess your sin, confess Jesus Christ as Lord, and then be baptized in water for the remission of your sins, Acts 2 verse 38, then you should not wait any longer. Let's open the Bible. Let's make sure you're doing the right thing. Commit your life to Christ. It's going to be worth it. Here is a Christian, that there's sin in your life that you need to repent of. Maybe it's something of a private nature, something only you know, and then that's fine. But I hope you would take it seriously and take care of it. Because surely you would not want anything to stand in your way of your reward that God has promised you, your harvest. I hope that we'll always be hardworking. Take our Christianity serious. Let us help each other be patient, and let us share our hope with each other so we can all get to heaven one day. It's going to be great, and it's going to be beautiful. I appreciate your good attention tonight. Let's grab our songbooks, open up to a song, and let's stand and sing the invitation song.